My name's Brownie Taylor, and I was born here. 83 years next month. I was here when most of the roads in town were dirt. We didn't have any tar roads. Hanover Street, you know Hanover Street where I live, that was a dirt road. Do you remember the pump at the end of the street?
No, I don't.
Yeah, there was a pump there for guy, and that, of course, the name of that street was not Hanover Street. That was Floyd's Lane, and that was Floyd who lived at the end of the street. And everybody used to go up there, and a lot of people, most of the people, didn't even have wells. They'd go up there and get their water out of a pump in the middle of the street. That was a long time ago. You expect me to remember anything 83 years ago? Good God. A long time ago. Oh yeah. You want to know what the school was over there? And we had the same teachers. Same teachers had been here for years and years and years. The teacher in the 3rd and 4th grade kept everybody back. Nobody passed ever in 2 years. And Donkey Bray used to go, Donkey Bray. Oh yeah, she was a beauty. And but I started, you can figure out when the heck it was. I was probably 6 years old, so I guess I must have started in about 1937, 1938. The largest class ever entered in the Woodbridge School. 26 kids in my 1st grade. And you know how many people of those 26 kids ended up graduating? Just me, all alone.
Is that right?
Oh yeah. About 90% of them got held back in the 3rd or 4th grade. And anyway, I graduated in the smallest class ever graduated from Woodbridge School. There were 4 of us, and they all started before me. One of them started 3 or 4 or 5 years before me, and then the other 2, they just stayed back once. What I did after that?
Yeah.
I don't want to tell you. I got thrown out of Springfield College, and I quit Northeastern and went in the service. Oh, God. We won't talk about those days.
So you got out of the Coast Guard, right? What's your story after that? What do you do?
Oh, I took everybody in Newbury and Newburyport around this part of the state. Built houses. Built a lot of houses in Marblehead, and, you know, just a pain in the neck to everybody, right, Jim? No, the company was a pretty well-known company. We had 13 men work for us once. Boy, that was the worst. You know, when you put on that kind of help, you can't work yourself. So you're better off a guy to. I went right back to 5 men. That's the best number. We always had fun. Went swimming and went to the beach and drove sand buggies, dune buggies. Never registered them. We always had something to do. No, everybody rode their bikes. We used to ride the Parker River all the time to go swimming. There's plenty to do, you know. I mean, you know what Quill's Pond is? You couldn't even get out there for crying on a Saturday or a Sunday. The place was so packed with people. You know what that pond was for, don't you?
I'm not sure.
That's where they used to cut ice. You know, they didn't always have electric refrigerators. Did you know that? You did. Well, you know, Jim is funny. Out there on Hay Street, across from the pond, there's a nice looking house. It's owned by a doctor. His name is Reardon. His name was O'Reardon. He's an Irishman, so when he came to this country, he didn't think he ought to let anybody know he's Irish. So I was telling him, I said, I go to him, he's a foot doctor. And I said, where do you live? And so he told me. And he says, why do they call that Quill's, whatever happened to that Quill's Pond? Well, did you know, Quill's Pond, they had, must have been half a dozen huge ice houses. Do you know what an ice house looks like? Well, the damn things are all 3 or 4 stories too high, and they keep cutting ice, putting it in, and then they'd put hay on top of it, and they'd start another few layers, and that ice stayed there in this all summer long. We used to go out there and have skating parties in the middle of summer in the ice houses. And, well, anyway, they used to have horses. And they used to pull this huge saw. It would cut the ice and score it. And then they'd have all people working on the ice, and they'd chop it down, and they'd float it down to a place where they'd chop it up into blocks. See, every block they put up in there was a block, and that was 25-cent block of ice. And everybody had signs they put in the window. Like we used to have Quills. That was Quills. Then they'd have, let's see, there was Hartnett. There were a whole bunch of them around Newburyport. And they all cut ice. And they'd sell ice year round to keep your food cold. And so my father always said to me, he says, don't you, so they used to hire kids. And so you'd take these huge pieces of ice, they probably this wide, 8 feet wide, 15, 20 feet long, and they'd give you a pole, and you'd pull this down of a big piece of ice down, and you'd go in, and then they'd have people chopping it, and taking it up and making it in, and they were all scored at 25-cent pieces. And so then they'd go around, they had an ice wagon with horses, and if you wanted a piece of ice, you'd put the sign in the window. So they'd come and deliver you a piece of ice for 25 cents. And anyway, I'll never forget it. I went out there, I got a job. I was a floater. I think they gave us $3 a day. So anyway, I was out there proud as hell. My father drove up. Jesus, you could hear him all over town. Get off that ice and get off that thing and never go on it again. So anyway, my first job ended right in the middle of a cake of ice at Quill's Pond. But boy, we had a lot of fun out there. Everybody went skating. Everybody went skiing and tobogganing. They made their own fun. Yeah. Do you know Plum Island at all? You do?
Yeah, a little bit.
Do you know where the Knob Station, Coast Guard Station used to be?
Nope.
Well, you go down Plum Island, and the end of the road used to be just about where the entrance is now. After that, there was no road down there. You used to have to go, you always got stuck. You always got, the tide came in and always went over your car. Anyway, down there, do you know where the Knob Station used to be, Jim?
Isn't it near where the federal headquarters are now? At the parking lot, so off of Southern Boulevard.
No. It's halfway. Well, you know, most Stanford used to live at the halfway house. And that was halfway from the center to Bar Island Head. And then halfway between there, it was a Coast Guard station, the Knob Station. And that's where we had a camp down there on the river. There were 4 camps. And you could only get to it. I mean, we didn't have any electricity. We just went down there and raised hell, that's all. And but anyway, we spent a lot of time down there to the Knobs. and the federal government bought all the land. They took it by eminent domain. We didn't own it, we just owned the camp. We were squatters, really. But things were different in those.
Are some of the houses on the Park River today, some of the houses on the Park River, like on Cottage Road and stuff like that, were those originally cottages on the island? No.
No. I think my camp is the oldest one on Park River. It is a very, very nice mid-Victorian. You see, you probably don't know the difference between early Victorian, mid-Victorian, and late Victorian. But have you ever seen a house with all decorative shingles on them? Fishtails.
Yep.
So, well, that was the period, just late 1900s. My place was built in 1894, and that had all of the decorative shingles and all that baloney. And but it's a very, very well restored place. It's kind of a pretty place, and they. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was down there yesterday. The funny part of it is I won't use any figures. I was down there putting a roof on a camp. Not the one I live in now. And a real estate agent came down, and I saw him over there. My camp was owned by a doctor from Amesbury. So anyway, I hauled over to him. I said, they're going to sell the such and such camp. And he says, yeah. And I says to him, you know, my mother always wanted a camp on Parker River. I says, I think I'll go call my father, tell him the doc is going to sell the camp, see if you and mother could buy it. Well, he says, okay. So I got off the roof and I went over and I made a telephone call. And I told my father, and he comes down. Meanwhile, he told me what he wanted for the camp. So I says, I'll give you that kind of money. I'll give you that money for it. And I says, but don't tell my father. And so anyway, he says, no, I won't tell your father. So anyway, my father comes down, he says, I think I'm going to buy that place. You know that? I says, oh, you do? He says, yeah. He says, I'll go see the real estate agent. We'll go to Amesbury, and I'll see if I can buy it. An hour later, he comes back down, and he says, see that place next door? I says, yeah. He says, you and I own that. I says, oh, yeah? You bought it? He underbid me and got it. He underbid me by $2,000. Can you imagine that? Oh, you mean where Garish is building now? Mrs. Boucher?
Yeah. Can you talk to me about her and what she did and, you know?
She was a wonderful woman. Every Sunday, see, she didn't have racehorses, you know. She had show horses. She had the most winning show horse in the United States history. The name of the horse was Flowing Gold. What a beautiful horse.
What kind of horse was it?
I don't know, it had 4 legs. Anyway, she had this big, what do they call them, stagecoach?
Stagecoaches, yeah.
Yeah, she has a stagecoach, and I think she had 6 horses in front of it pulling it.
6 hitch. Yep.
Yeah, and so every Sunday, she would come and they'd get the the hitch, and they would put the drivers, always 4 or 5 Dalmatians up on top of the dogs, and they'd come up high road with those horses and the dogs. What a beautiful sight it was.
So what did she do? I know she did a lot to preserve that area, right? Or on the Parker River, you know. So she did more than just so she had horses, and what else did she do for the town?
Oh, she do anything. She see, you don't know for a guy what $18 is. But one year, she probably had 100 people work for her. Everybody in town during the Depression that didn't have a job, she'd put them on. She'd hire them. So that Christmas, she went ahead and she bought a whole load of savings bonds. Anyway, they were all, you had to pay in those days. You'd buy a savings bond for $18.50 and let it go for 10 years and you'd get $25. And so $18 was a lot of money, let me tell you. And so she gave every one of her help a savings bond. I was with a guy and he was taking it back because Franklin Delano Roosevelt's signature was on the savings bond. And of course, he was just like everybody else in Newbury. You know, one year they had an election, and the law said they had to have a Democrat as a checker.
I believe they had to have a Democrat and Republican.
Yes, they did.
Both.
Yes. There was only one Democrat in the town of Newbury. They had to go out and get him. And from that day on, they always called him Roosevelt Dodge. You go out Parker Street, and you know the yellow house there? The old house on the left-hand side, across from where they just spent all the money? Beautiful house.
Okay.
That's where Roosevelt Dodge lived. His number plate was 969. And so anyway, they had to get him down there. They couldn't hold the election until they got that Democrat. Didn't have any Democrats in Newbury.
So do you know how that Miss Bushy, is that what her name was?
Yeah.
So how did Miss Bushy get her money, do you know?
Oh, it all came from down south. She only was here summers. She moved her whole operation and all the horses from down Kentucky. Did you ever go in a house?
Vaguely.
Beautiful.
Vaguely. I can remember when they still kept the horses.
Yeah.
And she only was here, I want to say summers.
That's how she was.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know who used to take care of her horses, and she came with her, and then she married Arnold Collis, Louise Collis. She was Mrs. Boucher's, what do you call it? Groom or something like that, yeah. So anyway, but anybody need any money, she'd give them money.
So Old Town Hill, did she own all of Old Town Hill at one point?
Did she own Old Town? I don't know if she owned the hill or not. I don't think so. Part of it. I don't think she owned where the crosses was. Do you?
I want to say she may have owned that southeast side, and I'm pretty sure the Story's owned in there on the other side.
She was a wonderful woman. Yeah, she married the minister in town. He was the minister. Her name was Dibble. You know, when she was here, then she married Boucher, and he was the local minister.
Her name was Florence.
Florence, yes. Oh yeah, she's a wonderful person. Did you know Cedric Little?
Not really, he was before my time.
All right. It was Seti's father. I couldn't pronounce his name. His name was Newell, and I used to call him Noodles. He's related to my mother. Go ahead, get out. Aunt Hannah and Noodles.
So do you know anything about the Littlefield farm and Prohibition and stuff like that? Were you around at that point? Were you really young at that point?
No. How old do you think I am?
Talking about Raymond and Newell Adams's farm.
I know it. That was quite a farm.
It was. Supposedly the largest farm in the town at one point in time.
Oh, but it was,
They owned over 1,000 acres.
they had a lot of pigs.
Yep.
Out there in the pig house. We used to go out there and buy cider. You know what they sold for cider, don't you?
Yep.
Wasn't just apple juice, you know. He bought, you see what they did?
Who bought it? Who was that?
Well, everybody that went there, you'd go in there at night or anything, and you'd go down in the barn cellar, and just as far as you could see, that whole barn had rows and rows and rows of wooden barrels. Anyway, he used to be, see, Caldwell's rum was big in Newburyport in those days. So they used to bottle the rum, and they'd leave so much of rum on the bottom of it. And so he bought all the barrels from Caldwell's rum. He put them down there, so that had a start of rum in it. You'd go in there and you'd take your own jug, and you'd go down in the cellar, and it was $1, and Jesus, it was terrible stuff.
So they were still doing, he still had hard cider like later on, you know, what years was this?
He was going pretty strong when I was in the service. And I was in the service middle 50s.
Yeah.
So who was running the, so what was happening at the farm? Who was living there and who was like running it?
He was still there. Our two brothers, weren't they?
Raymond was there,
Yeah.
and Newell was there, and Flossie was there, the sister.
Yeah.
So who was the one who ran the operation for the most part?
Oh, they all ran it.
Oh really?
Oh, yeah.
And what did they, so what type of farming things did they do other than cider?
Sheep.
A lot of sheep.
A lot of pigs, too, didn't they?
I don't know if they had a lot, but they did raise them, yes.
Yeah, I
And
think.
of course cattle.
Yeah. It was a nice. You probably went out there and got cider.
No, that was a little before my time. I can remember Raymond and Newell there. My dad worked nearby, so we knew them. Dad traded a little work with them. He may have gotten some cider there, but I would have been too young to.
Yeah, but I mean, you must have got sweet cider for Thanksgiving. The place used to be.
No, I don't remember that, but we may have, because one year we had a lot of apples in our orchard, and I sold, my sister and myself picked and boxed pickup loads of apples
And threw them right in the downable dump wagon.
that we took over to Adams's for them to press.
You know, geez, they had good cider. That cider mill, right, out back, they had a ramp that went up. And so they'd back the horses up there in a tilt wagon, and it was filled full of, they were rotten apples and everything. And they'd just dump them. And then they had a grinder right there. Then they'd take them and they'd put them on boxes like this thick, about this big, yeah, all ground up, and the worms and everything in it.
Well,
Oh yeah,
that mill was 2 floors.
yes.
And in what they call a bank barn, where it was built into a side hill of banking. And like you said, you dumped up on a ramp up on the top. Well, when you dump the apples from there into that grinder, they went down to the first floor to be put in those racks to be pressed
Right.
in the press down there.
You knew they sold that cider press, didn't you?
I thought it was still in there.
No. They got big money for that.
I'm sure they did.
That went to Sturbridge Village.
Okay.
See, at the time they sold it, they said it was one of the first steam cider mills in the country. They said there was a steam, they used to throw wood in there and
I know the boiler was in very poor condition at the end of it.
yeah.
It was burned up. It needed a total rebuild if you ever wanted to use it. And I assume that went with the mill, probably.
That was a neat place I went in.
It was, with the scales out front.
Yep. He'd weigh you. God, I remember those days.
And there was another cider mill right around the corner from there, where Boston Road comes out on the middle.
Oh, yeah.
It
Yes.
was another Adams.
Yep.
And I don't know, I can't say which
Of
one.
course, there was one next to me, you know,
I'm not surprised.
on Hanover Street.
It,
Drozdowski.
okay,
He used to have one down back, and he'd press it. And every morning we'd go out in the morning. My mother would have a fit because the boys from the Polish Club used to come down there, and they'd pass out on the side of the road. And so they were always in the gutter when I had to walk to school. So my mother, she would walk with me up into the corner of Green and Hanover. She'd stand there till I ran across the green. That's where she damn near died. I ran across there, I didn't even look, and a car ran over me, ran right over my chest.
is that right?
Yeah, she was standing on the green.
Can you tell me about your neighborhood, how it was and how it's changed, kind of?
What do you mean in my neighborhood?
Where you grew up?
I was the only house. I was the only house there. I didn't have any neighbors. I got along well with my neighbors. Comiscus was the only house on the street.
And what street was that?
Hanover Street.
So, did
You know.
Did you have a big farm or something? Or
Did we have a big farm? No, we just had a broken down house. And my father had to move into when he quit his job in Chicago. He had me. So they moved down there.
So what did you guys, in your house, would you grow up like reading? Because you didn't have TV or anything, or did you read much, or did you guys get newspapers like,
I didn't learn to read until I was 35 years old. I don't know, we always had something to do.
Life was so different then.
I mean, it really was.
After you got up and had breakfast, Ma would send you out. You know, it's a nice day out. Go out.
Get
I don't
outdoors.
see you until mealtime. And you were expected to, A, keep out of trouble, hopefully, and B, occupy yourself.
Oh yeah,
So for that reason, we made do. We created things to do. A lot of times it was with peers. When we got a little bit older, it was to work somewhere to earn a little spending money.
can you remember, the death of JFK? Do you remember what your...
oh, I know exactly where the shingle I was putting on.
I think everybody does.
Yeah.
I think everybody does. That's one that stands out in everyone's mind.
So can you tell me about that?
Well, I was shingling on the side of a house down on the Plum Island Turnpike. Came over the radio. I just stopped. I couldn't do a damn thing. Because, see, I knew him. I went to Governor Dummer, and he came out of the service right off of PT 109. He was a little skinny bastard in our public speaking class. He came in there and he spoke to us. He wasn't any bigger than my thumb. He was running for state rep.
No, he was running for president at that time. I'm sure.
Yeah, but I mean, when I saw him at Governor Dummer,
Okay,
he,
okay.
now that was in 40 something,
Okay.
and he was running for state rep. He just got off of PT 109.
Yep, yep.
What a nice guy he was.
But he was in the report when he was campaigning for president.
Was he?
Yep. I was in the auditorium at the Report High School when he spoke to us.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
He could speak to anybody.
I've heard stories about him visiting, involving Dick Knight
Oh yeah.
and all of that.
Oh yeah. The things that you just. There are things that happen in your life that you never forget. It's just like we were talking the other day. Do you remember Wells' store on Bronfield Street?
No.
It was down at the very end and was run by Wells and his son. And he hired a fellow by the name of Bobian. You know Billy Bobian down Plum Island?
No, I don't. I've heard the name, but I don't know.
His father, that store used to have the federal contract for the Coast Guard stations. And they used to come up there every morning and get all their food. Well, I'll tell you, you probably don't even know this, but did you know my uncle? So he enlisted as a private, as an MIT graduate. And he, just as fast as they were getting killed, he was putting on more stripes. So he was General Patton's first engineering officer. And he put the first bridge across the Rhine in World War II. They were putting that across. It was a double Bailey. And anyway, he came home one weekend and married a local girl. That was he never saw her again afterwards. And so we used to go shopping all the time, you know, at that Wells' store on Brownfield Street. And I remember them very distinctly coming. I was with my mother, I was only about this tall, telling that her brother had just been killed. And we just sat there. Never forget it. But boy, he was a smart cookie. Some of those veterans went through hell. Of course, I didn't see my father for over 4 years.
Yep.
He was in the service. And, he was the commanding officer of the Northern Occupation Forces in Japan, and he was right there. You know, Jim, they thought the war was going to get over earlier than it did. We were all ready to drop the atomic bomb, and so Father had been trained as the occupation commanding officer, spoke Japanese fluently, went to Yale and learned Japanese, and he was still on Hawaii, and they thought they were going to drop the bomb. They didn't do it. So what do you suppose they did? They sent them all out to pick pineapples. I have a dole in the fields of Dole pineapple, because the Japanese were the ones who were working in them, and learned all the local Japanese slang and all that stuff. So 2 days after they dropped the bomb, the old man went into Japan. You've heard of Mikimoto, the Pearl Man?
Okay.
His office was set up next to Mickey Moto's Pearl Factory. I guess he saw a lot of stuff. Boy, those guys had quite a experience. The guys that went and came back, they were much better off for it. I never saw a guy that spent any time in the service that didn't come back better than when he went in. He was either nuts or
It was great.
right. He was. I saw a lot of them. Take them right out of boot camp, straight jackets. They couldn't take military life. Military life is nice if you got to be a certain type of person.